I have been having more and more people write me and ask me which books that are in what we call the Bible are inspired scriptures and therefore part of the measuring rod that he gave us to measure all things with. And some ask me whether there are any other books in the ancient writings that should be included. We certainly cannot trust a list that is put together by man, and especially not a list of books that was put together by Satan's servant, whom the true word of Yahweh Elohim describes as the mother whore of Babylon, referring to the Roman Catholic Church. So how do we know what is his true word? The answer is, this starts with identifying which word that his son bore witness to. Our Creator promised that his word would be available to the scattered nations of Israel in the last days so that we could return to him through it. Moses recorded this in Deuteronomy chapter 30. What he did not promise is that it would be available to us in one infallible book without error. To the contrary, his son said that there is only one way that we can know the truth, and this is through obeying his Father. And he testified to that which we must obey. He gave credibility to the basics and told us what would guide us into the rest of the truth. He bore witness to the truth. He told this to Pilate in John 18:37, "You ask how I am a king? Into this cause I was born, and into this cause I came into the world, in order to be a witness to the truth. All who are of the truth hear my voice." And he said that his Father's word is truth, and he spoke the same word as his Father. He became his word, and it's the name that he bears. So this means that all we need to do is find out which books record his Father's word. He testified to the writings of Moses and the prophets. He did not list all of the prophets by name. However, he gave us the instructions on how we can know if something is true or not. He gave us instructions on how to be taught what is true. It is a process of being guided by his Father's seven spirits. The first thing to realize is being guided by his Father's Spirit is conditional. It is conditional on obeying him. The night before he was killed, he told his disciples in John 14, verse 15 through 17, he said, "If you love me, hold fast to my commandments, and I will pray to the Father, and he will give you another intercessor so that he can dwell with you in this age, the Spirit of truth, which is not possible for the world to receive it because they do not discern it, neither do they know it, but you will know it because it will dwell with you and it will be in you." He and his Father dwell in us through his seven spirits if we are walking in the covenant with them, and they teach us the hidden manna that his word contains. But having his seven spirits given to us is conditional. He said so in this verse and elsewhere. The word that became flesh said that it is conditional on loving him, and he said that if we do not hold fast to his commandments, that we do not love him. And he said that his commandments and his word are not his, but they are his Father's word and his Father's commandments who sent him. He is saying that unless we obey the commandments, we will not be given his Father's seven spirits to teach us the unleavened manna of life that was hidden from mankind. This is all by design. At least it was hidden from all except those who are being given eyes to see. If you think that you have our Elohim's seven spirits living in you, guiding you, and you do not hold fast to the commandments, you lie to yourself. They might be giving you advice to call you into the covenant, but they have not taken up their residence in you if you aren't walking in the statutes and judgments. Or maybe they were given to you, giving you advice at some point to call you to him, and maybe they were recalled from you because you stopped coming to his call and you refused to hearken to his voice. In John chapter 8, Yeshua said that we have to live his Father's word in order to know the truth. John verse 31, it says, if you live my word, then you are truly my disciples, and then you can know, or then you can perceive the truth, and the truth will deliver you. This really is quite simple. He is saying that if we live the unhidden manna, then we can be able to know or perceive the hidden manna. This is because living the unhidden manna yields us receiving his Father's seven spirits that teaches all things. And they teach us which words are our Creator's and which are the words of the wolves that seek to destroy the truth. Yeshua's sheep hear his voice and they follow him. Yahweh Elohim puts the responsibility to know the truth in our court because he wants us hungering for it. We have to hunger for it on his terms because he is the source of it. We have to come to him for it. We have to follow his son because he said so very plainly. And he was his Father's word. It's what he became. This means we have to follow his word. He only gave us one path to the truth. He only gave us one path so that we have to be taught by him and that we would flee from anything that is not from him, from any teaching that's not from him. There is no other path to the truth, and his son became this pathway and dwelt among us to teach it to us. He lived this path in the flesh to be an example to us to follow. Yahweh makes being taught by him conditional on our desire to want to be in his kingdom. We have to want for everything that enters into our mind to come from him. We have to want his righteousness. This means that we have to guard against that which is false and not from him. It's all part of the plan. We will not even obey him with the correct motives unless we want his righteousness to become ours. Otherwise, we are just obeying him to give him lip service. We have to want to be as he is. His whole plan to build his family is brilliant when you step back and look at it and look at the safeguards that he has in place to keep us focused on him if we're to become his. When we do want his righteousness and want to be his and nothing else, he gives us a healthy fear of not being found in his favor. This is the eye salve. He anoints our eyes with this eye salve, and then he gives us his other six spirits to teach us his word so that we know which voice to follow and we know how to hear the enemy's voice. He set this testing and proving ground up this way to harvest a people who have a mindset that want to be as he is. This whole process required giving us free will and putting the bad guy here for us to overcome and giving us the instructions to overcome him. The bad guy and his crew are here by design, and he gave them power to rule over us if we forbear his plan. If we forbear his plan, then we forbear his protection. He then lets the bad guy have a voice as well, so that we have to choose to not listen to his voice. This is why he let him infiltrate his word. When we go apart from him, the only way to come back to our Creator is by refusing to listen to the voice of something else besides his word, and to let his word define which is his word and which is not. Until we get into the depths of it, of course, then we need his seven spirits as we keep growing into the truth and we become more refined. This has been part of the test on whether we would pursue after his spirit and his protection on his terms so that we could know what is true in order to be found in his favor. You have to want to be found in his favor. He made it so that there is only one way to know which voice is which, and this is through being guided by his seven spirits, and this starts with obeying his instructions. He said it's from the beginning levels. The beginning levels, we just have to let his word, the unhidden manna, define what is true, and then respond to that, and then we grow. He is the master potter. This means that we must be his clay and yield to him if we're going to be taught by him. He is not looking for students who talk back to him and rebel against his instructions. But how do we know which instructions to obey to start with? How do we know that Matthew and John are inspired books? The answer is it is a matter of letting his creation testify to his righteousness, and then his righteousness testifies to his word. We can look at his creation and see that he created good and evil. So we have to consider why and search after the answers from him and not from our own understanding. We can see that things like homosexuality and adultery are evil. If at least you want to see, it's pretty plain. So why did he put them there? Put them here, if that's the case, if they're obviously evil. He says that he put them here for us so that we would learn to purge them out. He commanded us to purge them out. He put evil here so that those who would become his would loathe it and desire only that which brings joy and happiness to all. That which is wrong destroys relationships and happiness. If we really look into the recesses of things, we can see that even things like lying cause hurt, and they destroy relationships. We can see that man is a broken vessel in the flesh, and that we are temporal. And this is to give us a desire to be out of the temporal and into the permanent spiritual beings. He wrote a desire to live in our hearts to cause this line of thinking. But even this can be reprogrammed by that which is wrong. This is why some people kill themselves or have no concern for their lives for different reasons, whether they throw them away for chasing drugs or what have you, or maybe even just wild living with no regard for their lives, especially younger people, but just the programming that Satan's had an influence on them. We start with a basic desire to want to live, because he gave us this. This desire that is given to us is so powerful that we will even believe in lies to give ourselves a false hope of eternal life. If we don't turn to his word for the instructions, we'll just look for something else. And this is exactly what happens to those who have no fear of being wrong. It's where fear comes in. If we really fear not having eternal life, we would seek our Creator's righteousness on his terms, which means that we would seek what his terms are. Surely a Creator who put both good and evil here by design has terms. Otherwise he would have just put good here. There wouldn't have been any reason to put evil here. If we believe that he is almighty and that he is in control of everything, this means that he put us here for a purpose. There is no other explanation. We're not just some experimental rat station. This means that he had to make instructions available to us if we really wanted to know. From there, it is just a matter of finding an instruction manual that testifies to his righteousness, and there is only one match to this. Once we find this match, we must obey that which is not hidden in it, and then let it define itself and grow in it. Our Messiah was sent to bear witness to this match. He did. There is a catch, though, and the catch is the adversary was allowed to infiltrate the word. This was allowed for to make those who would fight to overcome all error dependent on receiving and possessing the seven spirits. Although Satan was not allowed to move the word of Elohim that endures forever, he was just allowed to add to it and to twist the translations of it. He couldn't remove it. If the self-existing Creator promised that his word would be available to the scattered nations of Israel to return to him through it, he meant it. So we need to start with examining what might have been added by comparing it to the measuring rod that Yeshua bore witness to. He bore witness to the writings of Moses and to Isaiah the prophet, and these writings bear witness to the writings of the other prophets and to the writings of John and Matthew. The measuring rod that we know bears witness to the rest of the measuring rod. In other words, the measuring rod that Yeshua bore witness to bears witness to the rest of the measuring rod. This does not mean that there are not translation errors in these writings and even additions, because there are. But the core of these writings are true. We need our Elohim's seven spirits to guide us through the translation errors and the additions. The writings of Saul and his followers Luke and Mark are obviously erroneous because they lead to a different path. Moses recorded plainly that anyone who leads us to a different path needs to be removed from us. This includes the book of Acts as Luke wrote it, and it has much error in it that helps set up the false religion of Christianity that obeys not the voice of Elohim. Satan is always very clever, though. He mixed in truth with the error and to give it credibility. This is how he works, and this is how he is so effective at deceiving. 1 John 2:21 says, "No lie is of the truth." This is why we have to be very careful and very diligent and fight for and guard the truth with all of our being. A part of a truth that is mixed in with a lie does not make the lie a truth. But a translation error that is a lie does not make a whole document false either. It is just that the translation error or the addition is the lie and not the whole text itself. Sometimes things are added just to make the translation into the English language read more smoothly, and this is fine. But often things were added that changed the text altogether. King James Version typically identified their additions by putting them in italics, but not always. Sometimes the texts were altered in the early copies that they translated them from, and they did not mention these on purpose. I'm sure they knew about them. An example of this is found in John chapter 8, in the story that is found with the woman caught committing adultery. Every time that I have talked about the righteous judgment that our Creator put forth with stoning people for certain crimes, I have had to explain the possible reasons why Yeshua would have pardoned the woman who was brought before him in this story. Yet I always felt a check in my spirit as to why the text was even there in the first place. It made no sense that it was there and where it was. It turns out that this story was added to the copies that were being made of the book of John around 1000 AD. This is nearly a millennium after John wrote the book. They added this story at this time to give their new version of the Messiah credibility in the book of John. This addition does not make the entire book of John error, though, but the addition certainly is an error. I knew this in my heart because my father's 7 spirits were trying to tell me this, but I was under the false presumption that the entire book was from the original text, and it is not. I believe the same thing is true with other passages, but this is not the purpose of this video. I'll give you another example, though. A while back, someone sent me a text that they called the Little Book of Barnabas. This one-page document contained a story of Yeshua quoting a story of Elijah to the Pharisees. I read it and found no fault in its message, and I took the word of the person that sent it to me that it was the whole book, and it was not. It was just one page of another document. It came up in a conversation I recently had with 2 different people. One of them looked into it and found a book called The Gospel of Barnabas that had a Muslim influence. For this reason, I did some research on it as well. I found that what I had received from the other person was just a clip from this very false book called The Gospel of Barnabas. This book was written in the 1600s. I found that there was originally another book circulating called The Gospel of Barnabas in the earlier years, but any copies of it are now missing. The book that is in circulation today has much proof that it was written in the 1600s with an Islamic slant. There is also another book that dates back much earlier called the Epistle of Barnabas that I have no clue about because I've not read it. Nor do I feel any desire to look into it for reasons that I will go on to explain. My point is that I want to make today is, even though one page of something might contain truth, in it does not make the entire writing true. Since the time that I was plucked out of the fire, I have not had time, nor have I been led to review the books of the Apocrypha or the other ancient writings in detail. A couple of very brief studies showed me that some of them that I looked into on the surface showed me that they were false. An example of this is the book of Jasher. Joshua quotes the book, so I thought it could be true, and I am sure that it originally was, but the copies that are in the world today have been altered to lend credibility to at least one false tradition that one of the Jewish sects embraces. It speaks of that the law was given to Moses on the 6th day of the 3rd month, and the writings of Moses clearly refute this. I spoke on this in the Feast of First Fruits 2-part video, if you want to go back and listen to this proof. So I stopped researching the book because the measuring rod proved to me that the copies that we have available today were altered along the way to uphold this false doctrine. So I'm sure that there could be other errors in it. I have had several ask me about the book of Enoch, so I thought that I would look into it last year, but every time that I picked it up to read it, the Spirit that is guiding me told me to set it down and to stay focused on what is at hand. I do not know everything that is in the book because I only started reading it, but I do know that the fruit that has resulted from it is a cesspool of false ideas. This should certainly be a red flag. There are so many who are caught up in so many wild goose chases from this book and other books that show that Satan has had his hands in putting the copies that are available of them together. In just over 200 days, our Messiah will be here to purge out everything which is false, so we do not have to sort through these things. There is not time to be chasing rabbit trails. Our eyes need to be focused on the truth that our Elohim is restoring and not worry about these things. We have to have our eyes be single. There is not time for anything else. In these videos, I have not quoted several of the books that are found in the pre-Messiah writings because I have not had the time to study them since I have been given my Father's 7 spirits. An example of one that I was led to recently look into in more detail is the book of Judges. He had me examine some passages in it to show me the importance of being diligent. I have quoted the story of Gideon in these videos because his spirit has led me to know that this is a true event. But there are other stories in the book of Judges that I had his spirit give me a check that as I read them, as I looked up the verses. This check told me that the stories did not happen the way that they were recorded, at least in a couple of the instances, like with the account of Samson. For this reason, I have been led to stay out of the book since then. There certainly can be historical value from some writings, but this does not make them the measuring rod. We must be very careful. The errors were made available to us to make us very careful and fearful of not having our Elohim 7 spirits to protect us. This is all by design. I believe that the writings of Jude and James were written by people who were being guided by my Father's Spirit, but I do not typically use them as the measuring rod because I have not been led to or to dig into them in more detail. There are certainly true statements in them, like when James said, friendship with the world is enmity towards Elohim, or like when Jude said that certain men had crept in and exchanged the favor of Elohim for a license to transgress his Torah. So at least on the surface, these writings appear to be true, and they probably are. I just have not gone through them in detail since being plucked out of the fire. Where we are at in time, we have our hands full with learning his Torah and returning to it, and keeping our eyes focused on what he's restoring. For the same reason, I haven't been led to spend time in the book of Hebrews to see if it is all true or not. It is a book that contains some truths, but they are not relevant to where we're at in time. Some claim that Saul wrote this book, and this is certainly not true. It was not written with Saul's motive, nor did it contain his typical signature of I, the Apostle Paul, the super apostle, look at me, listen to me type of thing. In any case, whoever wrote it, it is not the focus of what our Creator is giving us to focus on. He wants our eyes single on a certain thing, and that's returning to Him on His terms. One thing to always keep in mind is even Saul's writings contained truths. They contain truths. He said things like we must love our neighbors as ourselves, and other truths. Yet this certainly does not make his writings true. The fruit of his writings proved that he taught lawlessness. He cloaked his teachings like all serpents do by speaking with a forked tongue. But the fruit is the fruit. It's simple. Over 2 billion people on earth today call themselves, say they're following the Messiah, but they follow Saul of Tarsus in their lawlessness instead. So it should tell you, they certainly aren't not obeying our Creator for the things that Yeshua taught, as recorded by the eyewitnesses. So where do they get their teachings from? None other than the abomination of desolation. If I did not know that Yeshua was returning next July and that his Father is telling us to make straight our paths for his return, then maybe time would allow me to go through each of the books in the pre-Messiah writings that I have not dove into yet, and even the books of Hebrews and Jude and James. But time is not allowing for it up until now. Also, I want to add that I stay out of 1st and 2nd Peter just because our Messiah prophesied to Peter that he would be led astray. I spoke about this in the 2nd Peter video. So here is the answer to the question of which books are the measuring rod. So far, from what I've learned, they're the writings that contain in the following pre-Messiah books. The 5 books that Moses wrote are the bulk of the instructions for the statutes, judgments, and ordinances. They are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Much additional understanding and prophecies and precepts are contained in the books of Joshua, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Zechariah, Malachi, Haggai, Ezra, Nehemiah, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes even, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Zephaniah, and even Ruth. Some of these I haven't got into completely with the complete study, but all indications are, from everything that I've looked up so far and studied, they're part of the measuring rod. I do believe that the other books like 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles were inspired, and there is much wisdom in them, but I have not gone through them in their entirety yet, or even in a deep enough study to include them, since being sent to repair the breach anyway. I've read all these books prior, but not since being guided completely, since being guided by my Elohim 7 spirits. The only pre-Messiah book that is in what we call the Bible that I have been led by the Spirit to show me is error, apart from the many translation errors, of course, that are contained in the other books, but is the book of Judges. It's the only one that I've been shown that there's just blatant error in it. So I have not been shown that with any other books of the writings of the pre-Messiah books that are in what we call the Bible. But as I said, even within this book, it contains the true story of Gideon and other truths. It is just that it also contains error. So since being shown this, I stay away from it, and I do not use it for the measuring rod. With the post-Messiah writings, I have been led to stick with Matthew, John, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and the book of Revelation. The entire plan of Elohim and everything that we need to inherit eternal life is hidden in these books. Are there other books that are out there that were written by men who were inspired by Elohim 7 spirits? I am sure that there are. It is just that so far what is being restored is found in the books that I've mentioned today. And I don't see any reason to go outside of those books. If you think that you already have everything in these books mastered and you are living in agreement with everything that is taught in them, then you are further ahead than I am. I will stay focused on what our Creator has put before us to be focused on, and this is returning to Him through His Son's blood. And His word is clear that the water is only turned into His Son's blood if we are returning to His statutes and judgments that are found in His Torah. He has shown me that this is truth, and that it is the truth that sets us free. And His measuring rod that His Son testified to backs this up. I would definitely advise you to stay out of the 13 books that were written by the abomination of desolation, Saul of Tarsus, and the 3 books that were written by his followers, Luke and Mark. The most important thing that is that we are walking with our Creator in agreement with Him, and in His covenant, so that we can have His 7 spirits given to us to guide us through the translation errors and the additions that were added to change the text. Like the example I told you in John 8 with the woman committing adultery. Most of the additions are found in the books of Matthew and John. One of the major ones of these is in 1 John 5, where they added the Father and the Word and the Holy Spirit in heaven bearing witness. They added this in verse number 7 in 1 John 5. They added this to give credibility to their false trinity doctrine, because there was certainly nothing else in the scriptures that lended credibility to it, so they just thought, well, we'll just add a verse. Pretty clever. So be fearful of not having His 7 spirits to guide you. This is why Yeshua said to fear His Father, who can take away our eternal life. Because we need to fear not having His Father give us His protection by giving us His 7 spirits to guide us from everything that's false. The third of the world that is in Christianity believes that they have His Spirit guiding them, but the measuring rod testifies that they are of their father the devil, and they are guided by his spirit instead. His spirit is the spirit of rebellion to our Creator's word, and their fruits testify this is the spirit that they bear. But this third of the world does not know that they are guided by the wrong spirit. I say this to show you that Satan obviously makes his lying spirit look and feel like the real thing. These people have spiritual feelings and such, and they clap their hands, they think they're in the truth. For this reason, we have to hold fast to and hedge about the word that was given to us. We have to guard it and make it our life. It exposes the wolves and it guides us into our Elohim's fold. And his fold is going to be a good place to end up.